And there, now we are at 9 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And it is late evening at 9 p.m. as we discuss about the postponed Malaysia Agreement 1963 of the Constitutional Amendment. Let me give you a little bit of background of what has happened. Before this, as three of us will be discussing tonight. And for information, our discussion tonight on ClubHouse will be recorded, and we will be publishing our discussion tonight on various platforms. So tonight, the crux of the matter of the Parliament, aside from Budget 2022, it is the proposed amendment to the Constitution of Malaysia on Malaysia Agreement 1963. This is a very old issue, has been cropped up for many, many times, even during Barisan Nasional government, during Pakatan Harapan, as well as this time in Perikatan Nasional and a mixture of Perikatan Nasional and Barisan Nasional. What was we were expecting today and also tomorrow with the constitutional amendment. Again, later on, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, in charge of law and de facto law minister and Parliamentary Affairs, Datuk Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar, told the Parliament that the amendments will be postponed. This is a decision made by the Cabinet. So tonight we have Professor Dr. James Chin, who's also from Kuching, Sarawak himself. He's currently the senior professor in the Asia Institute of the University of Tasmania. At the same time, we have Dr. Johan Arrifin from Sabah. Welcome to ClubHouse tonight, James and Dr. Johan. So for a start,
thank you.
For a start, James, I would like to hear some of your views about this time, how different it is, the constitutional amendment on Malaysia Agreement 1963. I'd like to hear from your view as a Sarawakian. Now, back then, Pakatan Harapan proposed the amendment in 2019 to amend Article 1, Clause 2 to separate the two Bornean states from the list of states under the Federation. And this time, it has three major amendments. Yes, Article 1.2, Article 160. Article 160 refers, they wanted to include Malaysia Day. Article 161A is particularly on the status of Sarawakian natives. So what's your view on this, James?
A very good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for coming to this evening's Clubhouse. So basically, my view is that the sort of amendments that we're looking at, the starting point is, of course, to remember what happened in 2019. So in 2019, under Pakatan Harapan, the law minister, the late V.K. Liew, tried to pass or change Amendment 1 subsection 2, and he was not successful. A majority of MPs abstained from it, including the GPS from Sarawak, so they were not able to get a two-thirds majority. But this time, I suspect they are much more ambitious. As Norman has mentioned, they want to change three things from the get-go. The first item is not controversial, and that is simply to separate the states of Sabah and Sarawak from the list of all the states in Malaysia. So basically what the amendment is that they're going to change the amendment to the states of the Federation. Subsection A will list the list of all the states in Peninsular Malaysia, and subsection B will mainly says the Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak. The next one is also, in my view, not really controversial at all, and this is basically to put a date to say that Malaysia Day refers to the 16th of September 1963, not August 31st. Again, not controversial. The third item is something that is only related to Sarawak. So basically what the GPS of the Sarawak state government wants to do with Article 161A is to give the Sarawak government the final say on who is regarded as a Bumiputra in Sarawak. One of the unusual things about the federal constitution is that the federal constitution currently actually lists up a list of ethnic groups in Sarawak, which it regards as Bumiputra. So if you read there, it says things like the Bukitans, Bisaya, Dusuns, Sea Dayak, Land Dayaks, Kedayang, Kelabiks. All this was written way back in the late 50s and early 60s. So a lot of them are actually out of date. So under this amendment, this section will totally be deleted, and it'll basically be replaced with a simple article that says the native is whoever the Sarawak constitution say is a native. So basically brings the definition of a native back to whoever the Sarawak government says is a native. This will have major implications in Sarawak, but it will have no implications at the federal level. So these are the basically three things that GPS is trying to bring the federal government. The commonality with 2019 was that in 2019, part of the problem then was that the then Attorney General also was not very happy with referring to Malaysia there as the Malaysia Agreement 1963, and there was a big argument in cabinet then over the implications of saying that the Federation of Malaysia is based on the Malaysia Agreement. And I suspect this was also the same issue that was came up in the federal cabinet recently. A couple of ministers were actually arguing about the implications of changing the current constitution to say that the current constitution is based on the Malaysia Agreement 1963, and they wanted the current AG to brief members of the cabinet either this week or next week at a formal cabinet meeting on the implications. So that's the reason why it has been delayed. Now, my point of view is that that the current minister, the current law minister, should have foreseen all these problems associated with trying to change these three sections. He should have consulted the AG's office. And the reality is that there is a large section of the Malayan political establishment in Peninsular Malaysia who are not very, how should I say it, they're not very happy to redefine the federation as a part of the Malaysia Agreement 1963. They want to leave it as it is. That is that the Federation of Malaysia was based on the Constitution of the Federation of Malaya 1957. So I think there is some form of unhappiness in the core Malay establishment in Peninsular Malaysia, and you can see the objections are now coming up to the surface. So that's all from me as part of my opening statement.
Thanks, James. I think let me reset a little bit in the room. And tonight in Politic Malaysia Club, we're discussing about Malaysia Agreement 1963. This topic has been crop up back again in 2021 with the proposed constitutional amendment, this time with three main parts to be brought up in the parliament. So that's the view from Professor James Chin in Sarawak. So now let me move on to Datuk Johan. What is your view? How do Sabahans feel and view of this particular MA63 amendment this time around? How different it is than the previous ones? Or is it just same old business, or it doesn't affect anything at all? What do you think about it?
Well, good evening. Thanks for inviting me to join in the discussion. I think Professor James Chin has captured the gist of the scenario that we all went through or anticipated with regards to the Article 1.2 being tabled in April of 2019. To me, what's going on in the last few days has been quite disappointing because it's a repeat of the fiasco in 2019 where the Article 1.2 amendment was tabled. And from the Sabah perspective, some of the people, quite a lot of people actually blamed the Sarawakians for the failure, actually, because I think the Sarawak side did not support the amendments at that time. So there was a lot of angst against Sarawak and also a lot of recriminations after that why Sarawak did not support the amendment. And here we have the repeat again of tabling of Article 1.2 apart from the other items which Professor James Chin mentioned. So we're back to square one on Article 1.2 to amend Borneo states into the second category of B. A is the 11 states, B is the Borneo state, and C, of course, Singapore is left us and it's no longer an issue. So the question now is what does Article 1 to bring us? I've have several views of that, which you can discuss tonight as we go along. But at the moment, if you ask how we feel about it, of course, we feel very angry that the situation has changed. When Wan Junaidi went all over the place to engage the stakeholders, including Sabah, it was well publicized. He met our chief minister, he met the opposition, and they had dinner and discussed these things. I guess very deeply, and there was a lot of hope and anticipation. But that's the story of Sabah and Sarawak: hope and anticipation, and then a big letdown after that. You get a big puncture, you end up with a flat tire again. So what we're seeing today is the same repeat. But the thing is quite dangerous for us, because if we fail for the second time, I don't think we can go back to to the third attempt. Okay, that's the end. That's the end of the road. So there's a danger of tabling it the second time around. And the way I look at it, I'm not really confident. I'm also a pessimist on this issue, because it had, well, you can't say had it been done, or Wan Junaidi done the job thoroughly, it would have not happened. But I can't blame him 100% on this matter, because I think the other side, the other party, which is the members of the federal cabinet and also members of other parties, may oppose Sabah and Sarawak to elevate its position to a high level as partners of Malaysia. And I think there is, to me, without a doubt, attempt to scuttle this promotion of Sabah and Sarawak to that status. Okay, and I mean, had Wan Junaidi did not go around to engage the stakeholders and so on, we would say that he failed like the late VK Liu. I'm sorry, but the late VK Liu was blamed also for his failure by Sarawak to not engage Sarawak in this matter before it's tabled in the parliament, and that's why it failed. Because but although it failed to get a majority support, but we must also remember that 58, I think, of the members of parliament at that time abstained. Okay, so here we have another situation. Would the members of parliament from West Malaysia would they do the same thing again, to abstain once more? Although in what you call in the face of it, they may support or they may remain silent. But when it comes to voting, and we do not have the 2/3 majority, there's a great danger that we'll fail. And if we fail, there's no turning back. We would not be treated as partners of Malaysia. So that's the great danger of tabling it the second time. I think that's what I like to say for the opening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johan, for sharing your thoughts on that. I think just to share with the listeners who are following our discussion tonight, the tabling by the then Pakatan Harapan back it was tabled on 9th of April 2019. At that time, only 138 MPs supported the bill. 10 votes short of the 2/3. At that time, it was 148. 59 votes were they voted abstain from there. So this kind of things going on and on. I think what Johan also pointed out, if this second time won't be successful, is this really the end of the road? Or one question I would like to bring to both of you is this: do giving more powers for Sabah and Sarawak is actually a smokescreen to toy the crowd and electorates to support for support, in this kind of case, particularly in a weak federal government. It's like trying to gain support by really, is it really that the federal government will actually provide more powers and elevate the status of Sabah and Sarawak in order to garner support? Or is it just, it's just not a strong, a foundation to actually carry this forward? What do you think about it, on this, James?
So I think I'd like to come back to my earlier point about the Malay political establishment in Peninsular Malaysia. I don't think they're in favor of this. I think if push come to shove, I think they're quite happy to change the First Amendment, which is just listing out Sabah as Sarawak on a separate line, and the other Section A will just list out all the states in Peninsular Malaysia. I think they have a problem with referring to Malaysia Day as September 63, and the whole federation must be based on the Malaysia Agreement, because I think the fear is that if anything were to happen in the future, people will use that subsection to mount a court challenge. I think there's a lot of unhappiness in the Malay political establishment. You have to remember, one of the reasons why the Malay political establishment is very afraid of something like this is because they went through what I would call a very traumatic experience in 65 when Singapore left the Federation. So even today, right, if you were to speak to members who lived through that period, I can tell you that the overwhelming majority of the Malay establishment think that Tunku made a big mistake by allowing Lee Kuan Yew and Singapore to break away. You have to remember at that time, right, Singapore's security forces were actually Malayan security forces. The only thing that Lee Kuan Yew controlled in Singapore was basically the local police. He had no army, he had no real security. So if Tunku had told Lee Kuan Yew that I'm not going to let you go, I'm going to use the security services, he would have been able to hold on to Singapore. But to Tunku's credit, he understood that if Singapore had been left in the Federation, that would mean that there will be a permanent political instability, because PAP under Lee Kuan Yew was planning to challenge the MCA on the peninsula. So to Tunku's credit, he allowed Singapore to leave the Federation, but that left a very, very bad taste in the Malay political. People don't seem to remember that in the Malay political establishment, right, they never saw Singapore as an independent state. They always saw Singapore as part of the Johor Empire. So it was really part of Tanah Melayu. It was always being big Malay land. So for Tunku to let Singapore go and create an independent sovereign state was a huge thing for the Malay, what they call it, establishment to swallow. They're even more angry since Singapore left the federation, is because a lot of people in Malaysia or even outside Malaysia says that look at Singapore, even though they left Malaysia with nothing, they even had to rely on Malaysia for their drinking water. Singapore is now a much more successful state. And the thing that really annoys them is the fact that people always compare Singapore not only in terms of infrastructure, but they talk about the thousands of Malaysians who are willing to suffer the 4 a.m. Traffic jam, go across the causeway to work in Singapore because the Sing dollar is valued 3 times the value of the Malaysian ringgit. So I think these are some of the things that the Malay establishment can't stomach, and they're very worried that if they give recognition too much to MA63, in the long run, it may lead to the big S word, which is the secessionist movement. So what they want is that they're quite happy with Section 1, Part 1 of the Constitution, which is merely to put Sabah and Sarawak on a separate line. That has no real implications for the rest of the Constitution. But what they do not want is another part of the Constitution which refers to the Malaysia Agreement as the founding basis of the Federation. Even though that's a fact, they do not want to refer to it because they are afraid there may be legal implications in the future. So I think it is to me it is quite clear that the sort of feelings left over from 65 is still very much in the minds of the Malay establishment, of the Malay elite in Malaya today. and I think that GPS in some ways should have gone for the low-hanging fruit, which is just follow what VK Liu did back in 2019, which is just to change the first section and deal with the rest later. But having said that, I think the other section on making the what they call it, the definition of native back to the Sarawak Constitution, I think that is something that everybody in Sarawak really support. I think that's really important. That one has no implication for the federal government. Because we know that in Sabah they always had a categorical Sino Kadazan, but in Sarawak what you have is because the definition of natives was held together by the federal constitution, that led to a lot of issues. Because I think the overwhelming majority of Sarawakians do believe that if one of the parents is a native of Sarawak, then the children should be regarded natives. That was something that the Sarawak government has implemented at the state level for many years, but they could not do it officially because of the roadblock put up by the federal constitution. So I think that one can be done quite easily. I don't think there's any objections from the Malay establishment. But to refer the constitution specifically that the formation of Malaysia is based on the Malaysia Agreement, I think there's a large part of the Malay establishment who are not very happy with that.
I think that there are really some good points that you highlighted about the powers and dominance, and as well as the influence of the Malay politics, Malay power here from the context of a federal power. And with this also, would that lead to the question of reducing federal powers and influence over Sabah and Sarawak as part of Malaysia? So I think, I'm not so sure whether, is it right for me to say that the amendments on Article 1, Clause 2 is like a cosmetic amendment to the federal constitution, and it's just,
I think a better word is that it's just largely symbolic. So the first constitution amendment, the first item is really symbolic. Yeah, it's really symbolic. The real kicker is the second one.
I think the Article 160 about Malaysia, they, talking about the powers and also the rise of state nationalism itself is not new even. We have seen this over several periods of time in both Sabahan and Sarawakian politics, the rise of state nationalism and the call for the equal status for both states. What are your views, when it comes to, aside from these three, what truly gives the power, devolving the power from the federal? In your opinion, I would like to throw this question to both of you, James and Johan. Though before I move on to, I will go to James about the Sarawak state election. I will ask him about that. The real change or devolving of power of giving better autonomy to Sabah and Sarawak, wouldn't it be better that they actually look at I think previously the cabinet committee have also talked about 20 items, and then I remember the late Datuk V.K. Lee was saying 7 more items to actually fulfill. But of course, one of the things that I would like to ask is that if we are really looking into giving better autonomy for Sabah and Sarawak, why not we look at the 13th schedule, which refers to the federal list, state list, and shared list. Dr. Johan, probably I'll go to you first.
Yeah, okay. Actually, it's 21 points negotiated under Pakatan Harapan's time that you're referring to, not 20. I think Professor James Chin has analyzed the Malayan side pretty well. And I'm not so sure whether the amendment to Article 1.2 will bring any benefit to Sabah and Sarawak. And before this show, I had engaged in many discussions with some of our prominent Sabahans and lawyers also. They think it's very important that the Article 1.2 be passed and successful because it is critical for them to see the legal side of it, that Sabah and Sarawak is recognized as equal partners. But my argument as a layman, I'm not a lawyer, I said the equal partners question has already been addressed during Mahathir's time. Pakatan Harapan, they have agreed to recognize Sabah and Sarawak as equal partners. Okay, you can see Mahathir's various statements in the media, and also I think uh, uh, Mohidin also has mentioned in some ways that Sabah and Sarawak are now wilayah, okay, and a special region in Malaysia. So that is a recognition that Sabah and Sarawak are on a separate footing compared to the 11 states in Malaysia. But then, to me, it is very cosmetic, okay, because even you change Article 1, 2 and put Sabah and Sarawak in Category B, what comes after that? You see, we have never focused on that part, and that's what I'm concerned about. And I've always been saying that let's forget about autonomy and all that. Let's talk about the real things. What do we want as equal partners? What we actually want as equal partners is development funds. Okay, I mean, if you look at correct me if I'm wrong. If I've done my research on this, there is no definition of equal partners. There is no definition in the Constitution about equal partners. There's no definition in IGC report, Kabul Commission regarding the status of equal partners. It's just a conceptual idea and a desire by Sabah Sarawak people before they joined Malaysia to be equal partners. But it was not translated into law. And this is why we're having this problem today, whether it's 1976, where the amendment took part, or whether it's today, it's the same situation. We have never been able to define equal partners, and that is the biggest problem. So you pass, say, if you're successful in passing Article 1, 2 in the Parliament, and you become Category B, all right? Then you have to start negotiating again. What does Category B means, okay, in terms of development funds, okay? And no point becoming an equal partner when you don't have money to build schools, bridges, hospitals, and so on that we've been clamoring for all these years, okay? And of course, the autonomy to go with it, to spend the money, all right? So to me, it's very much cosmetic and making it a feel-good factor, okay? So once it's passed, if it's passed, which I doubt very much, that we will be so happy to say that, oh yeah, we are equal partners, okay? But what does it actually mean? I mean, clearly Mohidin, when he mentioned wilayah, also did not mention anything related to that after that wilayah statement, okay? So here again, after Article 1 to say if it's passed in Parliament, again, which I doubt again, what will happen next? I mean, what is the definition of equal partners that we are seeking? So I think it's a lot of red herring, a lot of what you call misconception, and so on with regards to Article 1, 2. Some people, like I said, the lawyers which I talked to admit that it should be amended, okay, and it's critical for Sabah and Sarawak to be recognized as equal partners. But I doubt that anything will happen, even though we managed to pass the article. So from my perspective, I'm more interested in focusing on the revenue part. Okay, for Sabah, we're talking about the 40% tax, which is different from Sarawak, because that's in our constitution, in the federal constitution. Sarawak doesn't have that. And talking about oil and gas rights and all that, which Sarawak has been quite successful in the last few years, getting the petroleum tax back and so on. And we are working on it. The interesting part, which is not covered maybe in a national newspaper, last Sunday, Dr. Jeffrey let go a salvo before he flew off to KL to join this parliamentary sections. So apparently, this matter was discussed in the state cabinet, and there was a consensus that they would support the amendments at the federal level. And Dr. Jeffrey came up with a statement saying um, all this should be tabled at the state assembly first before it's brought to KL. All the wordings must be refined and agreed at the state level, at the state assembly before it's brought to the federal parliamentary level. Okay, so and he mentions something interesting. He says, Wan Junaidi and Onkili are federal ministers. They represent the federal government. They do not represent the state government, meaning they do not represent the state, the people of Sabah and Sarawak. So that's a very interesting viewpoint because Dr. Jeffrey is also the Deputy Chief Minister, Minister of Agriculture of Sabah, and is a prominent politician of the last few decades in Sabah political history. So here again we have a dissenting view, all right, and then people are scrambling to discuss in Sabah, uh, um, whether it is necessary for this kind of amendments be brought to the state assembly before it's brought to the parliament. Okay, I have got several opinions from lawyers already, and in general, I think the consensus by the lawyers that it has to be tabled at the state level at the state assembly before it's brought to the federal government.
Could I mention something here? I think one of the big problems with a discussion about the current amendment is that um, one of the things that a lot of people forget, and this is especially true from people from Sabah and Sarawak, is that they think this is a big and important deal, especially the amendment to Article 1. The reality is that for the overwhelming majority of Malaysians, and here I'm talking about population-wise, people living in Peninsula Malaysia, is really a non-issue. This is only a really big issue among Sabahans and Sarawakians, and even among Sabahans, it is not a big issue among large parts of the Sabah population. As many of the people in this room know, slightly above one third of Sabah's population is actually from PTI background. So for them, this is not a big deal. It's really a big deal in among Sabahans and Sarawakians, but among Malayans, it's really not a big deal. And I can prove this very easily. If you look at the sort of social media expression in the last 12 hours, can any of you tell me what is the number one item in the Malay social media?
Timah whiskey as well as rape jokes.
Sorry?
These are the two things that's coming up.
Yes. I was thinking that in the last 12 hours, actually,
Sajat, yes,
was
not forgetting Sajat's story.
So you can tell that, right? But if you look at the thing coming out of Sabah, Sarawak, people talk about the postponement of the amendment. I just want to add on to what Johan is saying about the development stuff. Yes, it is true. There's really no point in say decentralizing powers or giving the powers back to Sabah and Sarawak if they don't have the necessary funds to carry out the development work. But I think that is just that is more to do with the details, the actual structure, because we don't really have fiscal federation here. Basically, here all the money from the states are sent to the federal government. That part can be restructured after there's an acknowledgement by the political elite here that Sabah and Sarawak should be treated equally. But much more importantly, in terms of historical analysis, it is true what Johan said that there's never been a definition of equal partners. And in fact, the word doesn't even exist in the historical documents. But it was in the minds of the original planners because it was very clear that you have to remember when the federation came about, one of the key reasons why it came about was because Tunku had to make the racial arithmetic. Since the British were putting so much pressure on him to bring in Singapore, he needed to balance out the Bumiputera population. That's why he wanted originally from North Borneo, Brunei, and Sarawak. Of course, Brunei pulled out, but he wanted that to make sure that the Bumiputera population will always have a majority. At his time in the 60s, of course, it was a slight majority. But at the back of the mind of the people who put this together, there was always a recognition that once this federation was formed, right, the three new states should have some sort of what I call a political level against Malaya, because Malaya was understood to be, far bigger population, far more developed. Everything was in Malaya's favor. So to even up politically, they wanted to make sure that North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore will have slightly above one third of the seats in parliament. And therefore, constitutional amendments would not have been possible without the support of these three states. But we know that after 65, when Singapore left the federation, right, this rule was thrown out the window. So while it is true what Johan said, that the original planners didn't use the word equal partnership, they did understand the what they call it, the power relationship. Because if you look at the last paragraph of the Cobo report, he made it very clear, including in the private letters to the British political leaders, that that this federation has to be based on the genuine intentions of the Malayan political elite. If they're not genuine in trying to federate these two states, it will lead to huge problems in the future. And here we are, 50 years after the federation was formed, due to basically, how should I put it, mistreatment and a big push towards centralization, especially during the Mahathir years, we are faced with this problem now. So the issue really is that how do you resolve this problem? And I take Johan's view about having more development funding through decentralization, all that sort of thing. But I think it's also very important that if we need to relook at the entire federal state structure in Malaysia and think about a way to restructure the entire federal state relationship in Malaysia, because from day one, right, the Malay political establishment understood federation in the Malaysian context as the federal government holding all the powers. The state basically has to go along with whatever the federal government wants. That was the attitude from 1957, and that is the
Thanks,
attitude
James.
today.
I think let me reset the.
If I
Sure.
can come in here, one of the question here, Norman, is it's always very difficult to answer, because in the opening clauses of the Malaysia Agreement as well as the Federal Constitution, we are we are considered, not considered, I mean, we are stated as one of the federated states. Okay. The thing is, when you want to amend Article 1(2), okay, we want to put ourselves in a different category as equal partners with Malaya. All right. There seem to be some contradiction in terms of legal terms. I mean, I'm just bringing it up because every time we discuss MA63, everybody has different opinions, lawyers, laymen like us, and researchers, and so on. So I think one of the good things we should discuss also is, do Sabah and Sarawak consider ourselves as one of the federated states, or we are equal partners? We are not one of the federated states, but we are equal partners. And then the question again, as I discussed earlier, what does the equal partners mean? So putting us back into category B and Article 1(2) would separately recognize ourselves as being equal to Malaya. But at the same time, in the Constitution itself, in the Malaysia Agreement, we are considered as one of the federated states. So it's something that I'll be happy to hear what's the opinion of other people, including
Thanks,
James.
Johan. Let me reset the room. Tonight, we are discussing on the constitutional amendment related to Malaysia Agreement 1963, which is actually supposed to be scheduled to be tabled tomorrow. But unfortunately, the de facto law minister and also in charge of parliamentary affairs, Datuk Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar, told the parliament today that the cabinet has decided to postpone it because they need to review some of the amendments and to also get some of the reviews from the Attorney General's chambers before being tabled to the Parliament at the same time. This Friday is also the Budget 2022. Just to inform to those who are listening tonight, this discussion tonight will be recorded, and both James and I are going to publish it on Spotify, on various podcast platforms. So in any case, since in our discussion tonight, since we started at 9, if you have any questions, and really, if you are also from our friends from West Malaysia, if you have any views, if you have any questions, you can also let us know. We can ping you up to the platform to ask your questions. Or if you are a bit shy, not a problem. You can always send your questions to me or to James via the back channel, and we will try to ask some of the questions tonight. But moving back though, just a little bit of rollback, looking at some of the discussions tonight, the timing is rather interesting of the, just now as we listen to what Johan and James has pointed out, and also what he also highlighted, Johan has also highlighted Datuk Jeffrey Kitingan, the Deputy Chief Minister of Sabah, so pointed out that, things on the amendments should be discussed in the State Assembly first, passed in the State Assembly, then to be brought to the Parliament. The question is this a rush thing? Or looking at the timing, because Sarawak is also due to face the state election, supposed to face the state election in the middle of the year, but because of the emergency declaration sometime in May, so the Sarawak state election, it will be likely, we're not so sure whether it's going to be this year or next year, because the emergency declaration for Sarawak will end on February 6th. At the same time, just a week ago, Datuk Patinggi Abang Johari so announced 10.5 billion ringgit budget for the state. And what do you think about this, James? The timing of this in preparation for the Sarawak state election?
So my view is that it's obviously something at the back of the mind of GPS leaders. They thought that this will be passed easily because, as you know, they had a meeting with the Pakatan Harapan leadership, and they did receive some verbal promises that this thing will be supported. So they were under the impression that they had two-thirds majority. I think that GPS thought that if they can pass it through in October, this will look very, very good for them in terms of the upcoming Sarawak state elections, because they can make it very clear that they are the MA63 champions. They could get it done when Pakatan Harapan was in charge. They couldn't get it done. So I don't have any doubt that it was at the back of their mind. But I think the Sarawak election thing, although MA63 will be a big issue, if they hold it before the emergency is lifted in end of January, I think the bigger question a lot of people will be asking is GPS taking a big health risk? Holding elections now, you may end up as a super spreader event. Most people in Malaysia do not know that in terms of the ICU usage, Sarawak not only has one of the highest COVID infection rates in Malaysia right now, but in terms of the ICU usage rates, they're also one of the highest among all the states in Malaysia. So I think for Sarawak, I think the pandemic is still in a very, very serious situation. Part of it is, of course, that Sarawak is a very big state. There are many small, isolated longhouses all over Sarawak. It's very difficult to get to in terms of vaccination and bringing medical care. But I think for the urban people, I think the majority would feel that this is not the right time to go for state election. But of course, we know that there's a big faction in GPS who wants to go for a state election this year, because part of it is that they think that if we hold it right now, the restrictions in place for COVID-19 will benefit the government. But more importantly, many of them feel that we can avoid the 18 to 21-year-olds if we go for state election this year, rather than hold it off until next year.
All right, thanks, James. I think we've been trying to get some of our friends up on stage, send out some invitations. If you have any questions to our speakers tonight, Dr. James Chin, also Dr. Johan Arrifin from Sabah, Dr. James Chin, who's currently in Tasmania. It's really late at night. We are moving towards a 1 hour of our discussion tonight on MA63. Over to you, Dr. Johan. How do you feel on this moving forward on this discussion? It's like every time it's a very cyclical kind of discussion on MA63. I remember this question from James and also some of our friends when we talk about MA63. How many of us actually read Malaysia Agreement 63, 1963? I think if we ask any of the audience right now, how many of you actually have seen the documents of the Malaysia Agreement 1963? So this also boils down to the understanding of the relationship of Sabah, Sarawak, Peninsular Malaysia, and together, just over the weekend, Prime Minister Ismail Sabri just announced Keluarga Malaysia launch in Kuching, and I wouldn't go to details. Yeah.
Sorry, Norman. There's a guy
Sure.
called Richard
Try to
Barrow.
bring him up.
He wants to say something. He raised his hand.
Richard, if you are, let me try to bring you up. Richard. Yeah, I've sent an invitation. Yeah, I've tried to invite him on
raise
stage.
Hand thing. Yep.
Richard?
Can they speak? Can they speak directly? Oh, they can. Okay. Yep.
Hi, Richard. Yeah, you're on now. Yes.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. I wasn't thinking of being on the platform open to being questioned, but I've got some thoughts on this. I've read through a lot of the history and the documents, the Stockwell report, and I am agreeing with a lot of what Johan has said, and also a lot of what James has said. I think that the people in Malaya, they're not really caring or interested in the Borneo states. I feel that there's a tendency for the political elite of West Malaysia to look down on the people of Borneo in some way. And I feel a lot of people are aware of this fact, you see. Now, I support quite strongly Dr. Jeffrey's stand. I think that it clearly needs more discussion amongst the people of Borneo in Sabah, which are I'm much more conscious of. And I feel that it's right what he calls for. He is speaking out strongly from the Sabah cabinet, which I don't hear anybody else doing so, which is a bit of a pity, I think. Now, I think there's certain things need to be recognized in discussing this thing from the historical context. Actually, right at the beginning, the leaders in Malaya only wanted the 3 new states to become amongst the existing 11 states. That's what is in their mind, clearly. This is what Tunku Abdul Rahman declared, first of all, in his announcement, which got a reaction against that within Sabah and Sarawak, I think. From the perspective of the people in Sabah, after the Cobbold report, when Lord Cobbold said that it should be seen as a partnership, he didn't use the term equal partnership, but he spoke of the term as a partnership. And so the leaders from the Borneo states were allowed to think of it as though they're 4 partners. That's as they're allowed to think of it. And I think that that's why originally it was placed Sabah and Sarawak as a separate group from Peninsula and Singapore. So there were 3 separate groups actually in the original constitution. I think that was just a face-saving thing. That was just a whitewashing or whatever you might call it. This was just to make them think like that. But the thoughts on the other side were different. And that is why in 1976, they thought it's about time it get changed. So it's clear there. And so I feel this issue from the beginning needs to be made clear. And it's based on that reason that there should be some changes. And they should. And so this, to me, is a first step. Clearly, in the Constitution as it states, it doesn't speak about equal partnership. I agree with what Johan says. Nowhere does it speak of equal partnership in documents. But this is the understanding. These are the thoughts that the early leaders had in their minds, had in their intentions. And as well as they had it in their mind before the Constitution was drawn up, that finance should be under state control. Instead, the Federation isn't as they anticipated. It has become very much centralized control. So I feel these things, I won't say anymore, but rather Dr. Jeffrey has, I think, made the right claim. This should be discussed. And so it's not just to be something imposed by Parliament, but rather it should be the assemblies of Sabah and Sarawak made clear what they are wanting, demanding actually, and expecting based on their original hopes. I feel that the approach, one of the leaders has said, we hope we will get something. And I felt that seemed rather pathetic to
Thank
speak
you so
like that.
much, Dr.
So
Barrow.
those are my thoughts.
It was a really good one. I
For
mean,
what it's worth.
I was just
Okay.
looking at your services in Sabah. You've been serving to Sabah. You serve in various hospitals in Sabah, and I know really thank you for your services in Sabah, Dr. Barrow, and I really appreciate your thoughts on that. This also brings to the question of how we view the relationship between the two states, between Sabah and Sarawak, as well as our friends in Malaya. What do you think about the comments made by Dr. Barrow, James?
I think there's two other issues which I think should be discussed at some length. One is the fact that since the late 60s, the Malayan political establishment has always been able to manipulate the Muslim political establishment in both Sabah and Sarawak. So that's the reason why Sabah and Sarawak can never come together for common position on Malaysia agreement or come to common position on how to deal with this issue. It's very clear that in the case of Sarawak, uh, when the federal government intervened on behalf of the Muslim political interests, they intervened to get rid of the Iban chief minister, and in 1970, they put their foot down. They wanted a Muslim chief minister or Muslim in charge. In Sabah, they did it with Mustafa Harun, but the problem was that he did such a bad job that they were forced to look for other Muslim champions. But that's one thing about the federal government. Secondly, on the other side of the coin is I think we should also agree that history shows quite clearly that the key leaders of Sabah and Sarawak themselves willingly gave up power. A lot of the powers was given up during the time when Mahathir was in a great rush to make Malaysia a fully developed country. So from 81 onwards, when Mahathir consolidated power at the federal government level, it was very clear that when he extended the federal bureaucracy to Sabah and Sarawak, right, the Sarawak and the Sabah state government willingly gave up powers to many areas which they should not have given up. Now, in the case of saying that a lot of these things should be discussed at the Dewan Undangan Negeri in both Sabah and Sarawak. Sarawak Dewan Undangan Negeri actually 2 years ago passed a resolution on the Malaysia agreement already. It is Sabah where it's much harder to get an agreement. So my point is that this sort of thing, while it's important, I want to bring back to the earlier point I said. This issue will always be with the federal system unless we look seriously at changing the sort of federal setup we have. Um, when you come to the issue of Malaysia agreement, yes, you can just stick to the actual wordings. In the case of Sabah, you get back the 40% revenues rest in Sabah, all that sort of thing. But that's not going to change fundamentally the structure of the federal-state relationship, because that is actually the thing that the structural impediments is the thing that's causing a lot of tensions, because the sort of politics that's emerged in Malaya in the last 20 years is sort of totally alien to the people of Sabah and Sarawak. And if you do not restructure federal-state relationship, I suspect the Malaysia agreement thing, even if it is passed constitutionally, is not going to take away the sort of pressures that we see in Sabah and Sarawak and the unhappiness we see in Sabah and Sarawak towards the Malaysian Federation.
Thank you, James.
Johan, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I think we are moving
I
towards.
think, if I come back to my question,
yeah,
sorry, Norman, if I come back to my question just now with regards to whether we are federated states, one of the federated states, or we one of the partners of Malaysia. Okay, that's, to me, is quite an interesting discussion on this matter, because Article 1.2 will put us as a separate status. Okay, but we are still one of the 13 states of Malaysia, number 12 and 13. So MA63 discussions also covers this quite a lot. People say we are not the federated states. We are independent states before we join Malaysia. And that's why it's so important for us to celebrate Independence Day, no matter whether it's 30 days only or a short time for that matter. But it is interesting because whether this Articles 1.2 will change us into a non-federated states, into equal partnership, is something that I'd like to hear people's opinion on this matter.
yes, I think as we move closer to almost 10 o'clock tonight, I would really, yes, I saw some hands. I've tried to invite Anwar Ghani and Adi. Yes, we have Adi on stage. Adi, can you introduce yourself a little bit to us? And what's your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Norman. Hello, everyone. I'm Adi, and I'm from Sabah as well. I'm a research officer working for a think tank here. My question really is just to, looking at the broader implications of what MA63 and these amendments can give for Sabah. Because when I see MA63 and the arguments surrounding it, it's always articulated in a way that's supposed to correct history over what the federal government and West Malaysia has done over the course of decades to Sabah. So I see like the restoration of MA63 always seems to be something more corrective to restore it back to that original state that was promised at the time. But coming as a very youth perspective, I see that these corrective measures are only halfway there when it comes to achieving parity or equality between the Borneo states and West Malaysia. Because when we look at MA63, there are certain guarantees that's supposed to accommodate Sabah's welfare and well-being. However, there are a lot of new innovations in Sabah's economy, such as the tourism industry, which I don't think it was really guaranteed in the MA63 when it comes to jurisdiction over that. So when it comes to tapping in there, that still requires quite a bit of federal oversight. I could be wrong here, but that's how I see it. When it's a huge cash cow that Sabah could potentially benefit from. And we've seen newer improvements in federal-state relations between Sarawak and the federal government when they achieved their own multimedia ordinance, allowing them to have more agency over their whole multimedia and communications industry, which I think Sabah could also tap for. What I'm trying to say is that, looking beyond MA63, I feel like after these amendments, what comes after? Should we pursue more efforts in terms of decentralization of our administrative efforts, or is this really should be it and it is enough for Sabah to get on its feet so that it can achieve some level of equality with West Malaysia? Because for me, I think it's only halfway there, but I feel the struggle has to continue even further beyond. And if we focus too much on this, we think that this is the only way forward for Sabah when there are many avenues that we can take. So I just really want to get the opinions of the panelists here when it comes to going beyond just MA63 because of its nebulous nature sometimes, like what's been discussed here. Sometimes no one really understands it, sometimes it's very confusing, but when it comes to going for a newer arrangement, a new deal, maybe that is something that is tangible enough that people can rally behind. So I just really wanted to know the speaker's opinions on this.
Thanks, Adi. That's a really good question. Datuk Johan, would like to hear from you. What do you think?
Yeah, hi Adi. Very well put. I would agree with Adi. That's why I've been talking of late to focus on revenue part. MA63 is a very diverse subject, very wide, and we can spend the whole day arguing about various clauses and all that, and we're not getting anywhere further than just the argument. So in recent years and all that, I've gone to focus on what really matters for Sabah in terms of the economic development. I think Hadi correctly pointed out that what are the avenues for revenue, especially in terms of the future down the road. I mean, tourism is one big thing. Unfortunately, we are affected by the COVID, but I think it's picking up again once more, and that's the huge potential for Sabah. And in recent months also, I've been talking about oil and gas and how 50% of the revenue for the Sabah state government comes from oil and gas. Somehow, our politicians are not talking about a 40% tax. I'm still amazed why such a big item in the constitution, which is clearly stated, I think in terms of revenue, there's the only one written down so clearly, but nobody is tackling that from the political level, from the chief minister downwards. So I take at this point, I mean, for the youth, probably they're looking further towards the future, okay, and what will happen down the road instead of just talking about clauses. I think the time spent by the what you call researchers, people who talk about MA63, has always been focused on the clauses, the arguments, whether it's legally construed or is illegal in many sense, and some people are willing to mount a challenge legally to say that MA63 is void, invalid, and some people are talking some things like succession, okay, leaving Malaysia altogether, okay. So these are the realities that we are talking about, and I take at this point that we should also move forward, look down the road, and I think in some ways all these are related to MA63 tourism. We're talking about tourism tax. We're talking about control and autonomy about how to decide about our tourism future in Sabah.
Thanks, Dr. Johan. And we have Dr. Rahizal. Thanks for coming out on the platform. Really love it. It's always
Thanks,
a pleasure to have you on board. I've always liked Dr. Rahizal's quick analysis on the kind of things. Taking on some of the conversations we had over the past hour, and as well as Adi's view, we're moving in circles on MA63. We're moving away on a more progressive development way. I mean, I'll say it's more than to really bring up the the values of what Malaysia truly is to bring us together. What do you think on this, Rizal?
Yeah, I think it's a good. We should applaud the government for wanting to amend the constitutions. But I was asked the same questions when it was proposed back in 2019, right? 2019, when they wanted to amend the article, and in fact, a lot of the conversations with the current amendment focus more on Article 1 too. But obviously, we know there are a few other amendments that are going to be included in the amendment. So hopefully we know about that in coming days. But I think a lot of the attention focus on Article 1.2. And why Article 1.2 is so mesmerizing towards a lot of people, especially people, Sabahan and also Sarawakian, because for so many years, I think for the past 4 or 5 years, the narrative here in Sabah and Sarawak has always been that the amendment that was made back in 1976, when they changed or they removed the column B, C, and then include Sabah and Sarawak under one sentence, has indicated that the status of Sabah and Sarawak has been downgraded, which a lot of people believe that is not the case, because Sabah originally were meant to be 1 out of 4, means Sabah, Sarawak, the whole of Tanah Melayu, and also Singapore. And I think Datuk Johan has mentioned about this, there's a lot of interpretations, but I always believe, and even though my view is against the popular belief in Sabah and Sarawak, I always believe that is not the case. There is no such thing, there is no evidence to prove that Sabah, Sarawak is equal with the whole Tanah Melayu. That's never been the case. The only justifications or excuse used by those who pursue this was based on the amendment that was made in 1976. They said the amendment that was made in 1976 proved that originally Sabah was 1 out of 4, which is not the case. You have to remember our constitutions is basically constitutions of Tanah Melayu. So within the MA63, it was mentioned specifically that the constitutions, the Tanah Melayu constitution would be amended, and it would a few articles, a few new provisions will be inserted into it. So instead of just include Sabah and Sarawak, they just put 1B, state of Borneo, Sabah and Sarawak, and C, Singapore. And 20 or 30 years down the road, people suddenly interpret that to means that, so Malaysia is basically the whole Tanah Melayu, Sabah, Sarawak, Singapore, which is not the case. I mean, this is what I've been saying all the while, and a lot of people agree with me, and a lot of academicians actually subscribe to this, subscribe against the ideas of 4-in-1 or 3-in-1, but they don't dare to speak up because it is against popular sentiment in Sabah and Sarawak. Now, when we come to these questions about equal partnership, again, equal partnership is a political term. Legally, if you look at the constitutions of Malaysia, it's quite evident that Sabah and Sarawak have more power compared with other states. So how can you say that we are equal? In political science, I mean, those who study federations, they will immediately, when they look up when they look into our Malaysian constitutions and look at some of the provisions given to Sabah and Sarawak, special provisions given to Sabah and Sarawak, immediately they will say this is what we call as asymmetric federations. Means situations where in the federations where there are 1 or 2 states who have more power, special rights, if you want to say whatever, privileges, you want to say it, compared with other states. We are not like United States. United States is symmetric federations where all the states have equal rights. So no one is lesser than the other. So how can we say we are equal partner? I just don't get it. I mean, for me that is just a political term.
Okay, I'm sorry to break in here. So
Yes.
basically, your bottom line is that this article amendment is what they call it is irrelevant. If you're saying it's irrelevant, then we shouldn't be doing this. But what about the second one that GPS is trying to do, which is to change the Article 160 to say that Malaysia Day is defined as the Federation of Malaysia according to the Malaysia Agreement. Do you agree with that, or you also think that is irrelevant as well?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the document, again, our constitutions originate from the constitutions of Tanah Melayu. And I've been saying this before. I think Professor James, you were also part of the speakers the other day when I said that there's nothing wrong by acknowledging that for acknowledging the Merdeka Day, because Merdeka Day has always been special to people in Tanah Melayu, but so do Malaysia Day. So for you to change it to Malaysia Day and omit Merdeka Day, then you are taking something.
No, that is not what the article. That's not what the amendment is about. The amendment is saying that when you refer to Malaysia Day, you're referring to the Malaysia Agreement on September 16, 1963. That's what I'm talking about. The amendment itself. I'm not talking about the background to it. I'm saying that. Do you agree with that amendment, or you think all this is irrelevant because these are all symbolic?
To a certain extent, yes, it's symbolic. I do agree with the amendment made, but I don't agree with the reason why we made that amendment. For example, like going back to Article 1.2, if they want to do it, if they want to amend it because they think that it was, 76, that is,
No,
it was.
but rather we've just said it. I mean, Johan and I we both agree at the very start of this session that it's highly symbolic. There is no implications to it. So we are all in agreement. We're all in agreement that it is symbolic. So
Yes,
I'm not
symbolic.
sure what is the argument you're making. So I don't understand
No,
what is the argument you're making.
Professor James, you yourself said earlier that there were concern by the cabinet, and again, I'm not privy. Maybe you have some input from the cabinet, as to why they want more time. But my guess is they are also concerned about the narrative or the amendment made to Article 1, because the reason that the amendment were proposed is because there is this belief that Sabah is equal to the whole Tanah Melayu. So there are certain leaders, a lot of leaders actually in Semenanjung who are really, I won't use the words concerned, but they are wondering, hey, is that really the case? Since Malaysia, when Malaysia was formed in 1963, so are you saying that when Malaysia was formed in 1963, it wasn't the whole Tanah Melayu or the whole Federation of Tanah Melayu is equal to the whole Sabah? Because a lot of people in Semenanjung actually don't agree with that. But it's just that, again, as I said, nobody dare to say it out, especially political leaders, because of political reason, they want political support and so on. And again, it is against popular sentiment. So again, I believe that those are among the reasons why there are certain cabinet members, they want to explore, they want to more have input or more research into it, they want more opinion by few people, and see where it goes from there. But my point is this: basically, there are few amendments within that raise a lot of concern, and I would go as far as saying that those believe that Malaysia, Sabah is 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 is basically a reimagining of history. I would go as far as that, even though a lot of people disagree with me. But I know there's a lot of, based on evidence, academic research, there is no evidence
Thank
to
you
prove
so much,
that is the
Rahizal.
case.
And, we can have differing kind of opinions going tonight. Well, of course, I think we have quite a number of people waiting in line for on stage. I would like to give the floor to Anwar Ghani. Anwar, what is your question? I would like, can you introduce yourself and let us know, in short, what's your question to our panelists tonight?
Thank you, Norman. Firstly, I'm a Sabahan, and I'm a member of Sabah. I'm a trustee in Sabah and vice chairman of the board of directors there. So, right from the outset, I just like to say that I agree with Johan and James when they said that there's no such thing as equal partnership in the context of Malaysia, because if you check all the founding documents, it all states as a federation within the states of the Federation of Malaya and Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore. Okay, so that means you are federating with the states, not the Federation of Malaya. Okay, so you got to understand that point. So this appears in the, I believe, in the IGC report, in the Malaysia Agreement, the English one, and the Malaysia Bill, and also
the Malaysia Agreement. So, right from the outset, I do not subscribe to this view that there's such a thing as equal partners. As Raizal said, yes, we are a state, and in the constitution, which is asymmetrical, we have certain powers under federal list, federal, state, and concurrent list. Our rights are stated there in some parts of the constitution, like Article 112D and all that. Okay, now let's go to the constitutional amendments as proposed by Datuk Wan Junaidi. What is the justification for the amendment to Article 12? Okay, it says here pindahan pada pasal 2 perkara 1 dan pasal 2 perkara 160 perlembagaan persekutuan adalah menjelaskan lagi kedudukan negeri-negeri di Malaysia selaras dengan semangat perjanjian persekutuan Tanah Melayu 1957, perjanjian Malaysia 1963 dan kedudukan selepas Singapura keluar dari Malaysia pada tahun 65 serta penjelasan dalam peruntukan tafsiran. Okay, basically it just clarifies the status as it is now lah after the ceding of Singapore, whatever you like to call it. So now what is important about these amendments to me is this. First, it divides us into 3 categories again. Okay, so legally we are one of three parts. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, as it stood before the old amendment, we are part of the Federation of Malaya because Article 1 says that, hang on, Article 1 states the Federation shall be known in Malay and English by the name Malaysia. The Federation. And the Federation is defined under Article 160 as the Federation of Malaya 1957. So we are a Malayan state if we follow by that definition. So that has to be corrected. So that is what this amendment is doing. So as far as I'm concerned, I got no problem with these amendments. I think we should make it, we should support this amendment because there's a definition of federation and it refers to the Federation of Malaya Agreement 1957 and also to the agreement concluded on the 9th of July 1963 between UK and Northern Ireland and Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak and Singapore. So it goes to 2 definition of federation. Federation means the Act of 57 and the Constitution of 57 and the Constitution of and the Malaysia Agreement 1963. So now what this does is bring to the consciousness of the Malayans, right, that look, we are now inserting ourselves. You must respect us as a separate entity. We are not one of the Malayan states. And then the other thing about Malaysia Day and Merdeka Day, it is an addendum. It is an amendment. It is an addition to the Constitution. Malaysia Day is defined as the 16th of September 1963. But it does not disturb Merdeka Day, you know. So Merdeka Day still exists. So the Malayans can celebrate Merdeka Day for all they want, but Malaysia Day is now recognized as the real day when Malaysia was formed. So what's this again brings it to the consciousness of the nation and also make it de jure, legally speaking, that this is the status of the nation.
you know. And as far as Adi is talking just now about where do we go from here, look, I think what this constitution will do,
Yes, go ahead.
can
I
you all
think
hear me?
we'll give you a short time because I think we have two more persons waiting in line. Probably you can sum up quickly.
Okay, as far as what Adi is saying about where do we go from here, there are three working committees that's been formed, right? Socio-economic, security, and equal status, and constitution. So I think if you want to make a difference, you identify the area where you think you would like to contribute to, and then after make your presence known there. Be somebody be somebody that disturbs them all the time with your proposals, and try to make sure that whatever you think should be done is done. And for this, you have to engage the powers that be. For instance, like I engage myself to tourism. So I've collected a lot of opinions. I'm going to engage all the players in the market. We're going to put together our opinions and present this as a memorandum to the socio-economic committee. And it's up to them to vet it. And then if they require help with drafting of the laws, I've already tried to engage the State Attorney General and also maybe probably further connection with the federal side, get the constitutional amendments that's required to be done.
Thank you so much, Anwar, for sharing your thoughts. And
Thank
some
you.
of the key things, from this discussion, and also we have differing opinions. I think it is also important to really take when we have that platform. It's also very important for us to use the opportunity to highlight some of the issues, that we face in Sabah and Sarawak into the national platform. And at the end of the day, these will actually bring bringing the bridges a little bit closer than before. This is what we really hope looking forward. I'd like to open the floor to Adam Arrifin. Later on, we'll open the floor to Steve Mario. Adam, floor is yours. What's your question? And a little bit of introduction of yourself.
Yep, thanks, Norman. I believe this is my second time in the room, but I'll just share a little bit about myself. I'm an event organizer, so usually the time I travel abroad, to host organized events for corporate people, basically CEOs and entrepreneurs. But that's on the career side. On the political side, I'm a party member representing Pakatan, and I have a podcast. If you guys just click on my bio, I did mention that I represent a party where they had the Sarawak state election back in 2016. So maybe like some of you guys from Sarawak, then I guess you know what happened there, right? Yeah, so I did mention that in my podcast. You can click on my bio. You can just listen it on Spotify. So I don't really have a question, but I guess I have to say my piece and opinion about the MA63 amendment. I know that the bill is meant to be tabled tomorrow, but I heard that now recently they are going to have a postponement until this Friday the 29th. Apparently the AG had some issue in understanding or have a proper explanation of knowing whether this MA63 is meant to be needed to be tabled or needed to be mentioned in Parliament. So that is what I read in the news, unless some of you guys can rectify on some of the updates I got. But I guess it is time that Sabah and Sarawakian people need to be recognized in their position in Malaysia, because they have been sidelined for far too long. And let's just put it this way, for lack of a better word, they seemed unimportant for people in Peninsula, because I am from KL, and I know that whenever I'm here, people talk less about the importance of Sabahans and the unimportance of Sarawakians. And I have a lot of friends in Borneo who notice that, and they are very, very disappointed of their good friends in Peninsula. So I guess this amendment is necessary to show the position of people in Sabah Sarawak, of where they are to represent Malaysia in a wider scope, as they put it. Because you must understand, in Sabah and Sarawak, I don't live there, but I read news, they have also their own social issues and their own state issues they need to address, like immigration, pollution, and then water irrigation issues, landslides, people, selling, illegal logging and stuff like that. So a lot of things need to be addressed and need to be issued. And it's time that Sabah and Sarawakians need to be recognized of how important they are moving forward. So yes, it is necessary. But let's see how it happens this Friday. But let me tell you this. Do you know Pakatan Harapan, during the administration in 2019, did table this, but it wasn't passed because they failed to achieve 2/3 majority out of the 222 MPs in Parliament. Don't be surprised on Friday, or who knows, delayed to next week, that it will not be passed because they won't be able to get the 2/3 majority. Yeah.
Thanks,
So be
Adam.
ready
I
for
think
that.
just
That's
to touch up on that, it's very unlikely it will be tabled this Friday because this Friday is actually Budget 2022. I think most likely it might be next week. I think I will bring that question on possibility of the bill on MA63 amendment can be defeated. I think I'll bring back that question later. But let me give the floor to Steve. I think we also have Leslie Kalom from Sarawak coming in, but I'll give it to Steve. Steve, floor is yours. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. Just a simple question, actually. But before that, my name is Steve Mario, and I'm a radiographer in one of the government hospital here in Sabah. The question for me is to any of the panel here, because I heard both sides already. Some say that we are like one of the third, something like that, and then some say we are not. So my question is, in the first place, why they changed the constitution? A constitution pula. Why they changed the situation of especially the Borneo states in 1976 in the first place? Why do they change it? I mean, what do we know is that 1963 is different. Maybe because I'm not there at that time. Okay, so it's not fair for me. But in the first place, why in the first place why the changes is happen in the first place, and now. Some people say the Sabahan and the Sarawakian maybe like minta this thing again, but actually it's inside that. It's already inside that. It's the rights of the Sabahan and the Sarawakian. So that's my question lah. So, but I mean the question is why it was being changed in the first place. I got a lot of points actually. I mean a lot to say actually, but I don't want to become. That's all from me lah. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for the question, Steve. I wish you all the. Hopefully things are getting better in Sabah, and I think right now you are in Hospital Kinabatangan. Hope things get a lot better in Sabah as well. So James, the amendment in 1976, as a question by Steve, what do you take on that, James? Trying to get James. If not, Johan, are you there, Johan?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
All right, Johan, would you like to answer the question by Steve?
Yeah. Hi, Steve. I don't think I can contribute much. I think there's a lot of speculation what actually happened in 1976. I think all I can say is that there's always this argument that that our forefathers, our former leaders or MPs, were there and they voted and agree with the amendments. Okay, and why did they agree or why did they take such an action? We still don't know, and we can speculate. Some people say it's because federal pressure. They were forced or coerced into agreeing to it. And that's one of the biggest arguments that we always facing is that why when West Malaysia asks us, hey, you MPs actually are the ones that supported that bill or amendments, okay? and it's always very difficult to argue. And then we can always say that, now people were not educated, they were not brief, and so on, which is not a very good excuse. It sounds a bit corny, that we claim that we are uneducated and just we went along with that circumstances of passing the bill. But again, as I said, I don't want to speculate what actually happened. Of course, we're all disappointed that it has happened. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Johan. I think we have a little bit of technical problems with Dr. James Chin. With that, I'll just reset the room a little bit. And tonight, we're discussing about Malaysia Agreement 1963 and the proposed constitutional amendment. This time, we have Article 1, Clause 2, Article 160, and Article 161A, which involves the Sarawakian natives. For your information, our discussion tonight will be recorded and it will be later we'll publish on the various platforms on our podcasts. In the meantime, we have Leslie Kalom. The floor is yours. Leslie, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit and go straight to your question?
Yeah, Norman. My name is Leslie. I'm True Blue and Sarawak. That's all I can say. And then I just want to correct what Adam said. Actually, the first reading of the constitutional amendment should be done tomorrow, 26th. The first reading, and then the second reading supposed to be on the 28th. However, if you guys read the statement from the law minister today, Wan Junadi, he said that the cabinet agree in principle to for the constitution amendment. However, there was some cabinet members request for an AG, our AG, to present during the cabinet meeting on 29 to explain some of the things to the fellow cabinet ministers. This is to correct what Adam said. Maybe he might misleading. He's not being be careful with his facts. And the first reading, if any one of you understand the procedure in the parliament, the parliamentary procedure, the first reading is basically a minister just read the title of the amendment, the first reading, bacaan pertama. And then for the second reading, and only then will be debated and then voted. And after that, we pass that part, we go for the third reading. Again, we voted, and only then it become law. That's it. Thank you. But last but not least, the new amendment, the one we're going to have soon, I hope and I believe, is way much more better than the one that Pakatan Harapan did offer in 2019. All I can say is perkara 1 for the
Article 1, Clause 2.
Article. Yes, very susah. Article 1, Clause 2. There will be some amendments similar to the previous one they offered by Pakatan Harapan. However, I think 1602, if I'm not mistaken,
it's Article 160 and Article 161A.
Federation.
Article 160 refers to the Malaysia Day.
It will redefine the definition of the federation instead of referring to the 1957. Okay. But there are several amendments will be done soon, but I can assure that it's way much more better than just a one-liner that Pakatan Harapan offered in 2019.
All right. It's okay. Thank you for your thoughts, Leslie. And we have Mazliani. Mazliani, the floor is yours. What's your question to our speakers tonight? Or you have any comments? Can you just also introduce yourself a little bit and go straight to your what's your comment or question? Hi.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hi, Norman. Thank you for having me on the stage. Hello, Professor James and Dr. Johan. I've been listening in and I've heard Professor James saying that you have established with Dr. Johan that this amendment would seem to be more of a symbolic nature. Right. I understand that part, but I'm leading up to my question, but let me just establish this first. Let's take a step back. So when we take a step back, I think it might be symbolic, but isn't it, in order to establish the form of MA63, necessary because there has been a lack of implementation of it. So they are in dire need for things to be implemented according to the Malaysia Agreement 1963 all through. So because that is lacking, so now they are trying to fight for it. So in order for this to be enforced, so their way is by giving recognition into the Malaysia Agreement 1963 itself. And because of this effort of giving recognition, and if it continues not to be recognized, don't you think that things would be taken beyond domestic matters? I mean, beyond internal matters within Malaysia. It will be brought at an international level. So what does Prof. James and Dr. Johan think about this? Is it not, so to say, quite a dangerous proposition to continue sweeping this matter under the floor, because it will open up possibilities to go internationally?
Thank you
That's
so
all.
much, Brother
Thank
Adi.
you.
Dr. James, welcome back. The question's directed to you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I had a problem with my mic just now. Okay. I think there's lots of misconception. One of the misconception was just raised, which is that you can actually litigate the Malaysia Agreement on the international in the international arena. I have some bad news for all of you. The answer is no. You cannot litigate Malaysia Agreement in the international arena. The only people who can litigate a Malaysia Agreement in the international arena is actually the state itself, and here I'm talking about the federal government and probably the state government as well. Anybody else is not in a position. Having said that, the other thing, there's also a lot of misconception about litigation within the domestic court. The reality is there's never been a case that deals with Malaysia Agreement as a whole in the Malaysian judicial system. I repeat that there's never been a case that litigates the validity of the whole Malaysia Agreement. There are some people who try to litigate certain aspects of it. For example, there was a very famous case in Sabah dealing with the clause on modernization. That never even proceed to the litigation stage. It was thrown out on a technicality. So again, there's actually no court cases related to this. So there are people talking about litigation at the international stage, at the domestic, all these things are. The reality is that there's no what they call it, no precedence and no case history on this issue. Now, on the issue of taking back powers, what have you, again, we have to be very careful what we're talking about. When the federal government centralized a lot of the powers through bureaucratic means from Sabah and Sarawak, those were done with the permission of the state governments in both Sabah and Sarawak at that time. I repeat, this was done with the permission of the Sabah and Sarawak government at that time. So when they talk about decentralization, right, it is basically giving back the powers that was previously centralized. Some of it no, but most majority was basically a bureaucratic thing. And also a lot of people think that the 21 items in the what they call it, in the MA63 committee set up during Pakatan Harapan dealt with MA63 issue? The answer is no. If you look at the MA63 closely, most of the items, the 21 items, did not deal, well, in fact, nothing to do with MA63. Things like oil and gas, nothing to do with MA63, strictly speaking. Things like who controls Labuan, port system, all that sort of thing. A lot of that is actually not in MA63. What we're talking about is a political autonomy, and this is where I want to come back to my very, very early point that I made. One of the things was that after you get the symbolic recognition of the status of Sabah and Sarawak in the federation, then you need to look at the next step, which is the future of federal-state relationship and the structure of the federal-state relationship in the Malaysian system. Because otherwise, right, you'll be back to square one. and the existing tensions called MA63 now will be, will change to another form of tension between federal state, because one of the problems we have in the Malaysian system is that too much power is held by the federal government. And this is not only the complaint from Sabah and Sarawak. If you speak to people in Malaya, right, I can tell you Johor, Kelantan, Terengganu are also very unhappy with the level of federal power as well. So that's the reason why very early on I talk about if we really want to resolve this issue in the long term, you really need to relook at this whole issue of federal-state relationship and the structure that goes along with this.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
I would like to share to those who are listening some of I'll read the 17 matters that have been part of the 21. Said number 1 is claims to export duties for logs and forest products in Sabah, regulation of gas and electricity distribution in Sarawak and Sabah. Number 3, implementation of federal works in Sarawak and Sabah, labor force in Sabah and Sarawak, state authority over health issues in the 2 states, administration of Sipadan and Lititan Islands in Sabah, agriculture and forestry issues, federal financial obligations under joint list, review of special gifts, fishing, inshore and offshore fisheries, ownership given to federal land in states, legal authority on environment and tourism, Article 112 of the Federal Constitution, increase in employment, delegation of power to Sabah and Sarawak courts, jurisdiction of Chief Judge of Sabah and Sarawak, autonomous administration of Sabah and Sarawak courts, and experience of Borneo judges to hear appeal cases filed in a Borneo state, judicial commissioner appointment and stamp duties imposed on transfer instruments, charges, lease of land under Sabah and Sarawak Land Ordinance. Just now, Professor James has also given his views on that. Johan, Datuk Johan, what do you think about some of the comments on that?
Yeah, if I'd like to answer Leslie's comment just now. Yeah, I think the legal fraternity would agree that such an amendment is necessary, it's not symbolic and so on. My concern is that what happens after that? I raised this question earlier, and okay, so we siok sendiri, we already Article 1-2, and we equal partners, so-called equal partners lah. And then we go back to the table again and start negotiating the terms and conditions of what is Article 1-2 means. All right. So this is the game that is being played by federal, and we have to recognize that they will take us step by step, but there is no substance in Article 1-2. I mean, so far what is out in the media is just a scant reading of whatever is to be tabled, but there's nothing in the substance to say that Article 1-2 will mean that we'll get 40% tax revenue back, and then the continental shelf will be recognized by the federal government and giving us back the oil and gas rights. So this is one of my concerns. I mean, I'm all for amendments to putting us in category B, but again, my question earlier again, we're still a federated states, one of the 13 states, number 12, number 13. And remember, it's not only to look after Sabah and Sarawak, they have to look after the 11 states also to make them happy. So at the end of the day, if you want to table something, in my opinion, okay, my personal opinion, you have to substantiate what does Article 1-2 really means, apart from siok sendiri to say, okay, we are now equal. And we sit at the main table with the Prime Minister, left and right, Sabah, Sarawak, okay, and the rest, the other table is 11 states, okay. But what does it mean? I mean, we're sitting at a table as a VIP. It doesn't mean that we are, here or what than the other states, okay. I think we have to go further and discuss that if we are federated states, and we are, I believe, if you read the Constitution and also the opening of the Malaysia Agreement, which says we are one of the federated states. but we are different. Yes, I think as I have explained that. Yes, I think Professor Shah also have explained that we are one of the federated states, but we have special powers. All right, so we are different from the rest of the 11 states that we have the special powers. But what are the special powers that we have? We have immigration, taxes, and so on. But I think we need to define that under Article 1.2. And so I'm not saying there's nothing wrong in passing Article 1.2, but then we should also discuss what is the substance of Article 1.2 going forward.
Mashallah, Johan. And before we try to end the conversation tonight, we have Faza Arif on stage. The floor is yours. I think Mazliani has a question later, but I'll give it to Faza first. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Faza. I'm Sabahan. Some of you know who I am. I'm Dr. Johan's wife, actually. But I've been quite vocal about the MA63 as well. So I feel that I need to have my say as well tonight. First of all, I think when we speak about Sabah, Sarawak, and Malaya, we tend to forget the sizes of these two states, Sabah, Sarawak, compared to Malaya. And herein lies the problem of us not being equal partner. We are such huge area. We have such huge area. And if we were to say that we are comparable to Perlis, comparable to the other states, why would any of our forefathers want to be, on the same par as all the other states? So the intention had always been that we are on the same status as Malaya. They never actually, when our forefathers went to make an agreement with Tunku Abdul Rahman, and it was not that we want to be on the same table with the other leaders of the other states. So I agree with what Mazliani said. For us to talk about the other demands, we have to go back to the structure, to go back to the original form of the agreement of MA63. Okay, so the amendment is regardless of regardless of there is going to be any substance or not, I think it is very important that we go back to that. But at the same breath, we should also be pushing for the income revenue, because our people are starving here in Sabah and Sarawak. We should really be looking at the revenue the same breath. And the big question I have is that why is there a lack of cohesiveness among Sabahans themselves in voicing out their opinions? There's always, especially the older, I'm sorry, but I've seen so many WhatsApp groups, they are very good at arguing with one another. And everybody wants to be the heroes. Everybody wants to be the little Napoleons. And even, with the political parties all divided, it goes to show that we are never going to achieve anything. I think somebody said that earlier, that with the reading that we're going to go through later, it's just going to be a reading and then it's going to be a failure. Unless everybody start to scrutinize, I'm a pessimistic, optimistic person, or you can say it the other way, because if you want to have optimistic results, now is the time to really scrutinize who are the MPs you think that will not be agreeing to it, and everybody should be focusing on every individual of them and then questioning every one of them why they should be turning down the not voting for the amendment. I think that is the one that is most important. Focus on all the MPs And if we really believe that we want to push for this amendment to happen, because definitely it's not going to happen if nobody pays attention, if we are not going to do a macro, manage the whole issue. And that is my big question. Why is there a lack of cohesiveness among Sabahans and Sarawakans, and then
Thank you.
both
Thank you
of
so
them
much, Fazar.
together
I
as
think
well?
for those who are
Thank
listening
you.
tonight, I have a new update if you are following our discussion tonight. And just recently concluded in one of the meetings, the steering committee of the MOU, the MOU between Pakatan Harapan and the government on the transformation and the political stability this evening in Parliament. This is a statement released by the National Organizing Secretary of DAP, YB from Seremban, Anthony Lok, pointed out that in the meeting they discussed about the agendas mentioned in the MOU. And he also pointed out that they stated their commitment by all Pakatan Harapan parliamentary members of the parliament to support the constitutional amendment of the federal constitution on the MA63 agenda to return the original status of Sabah and Sarawak in the federation as in the Malaysia Agreement 1963. And he also continued to say that the amendment cannot be delayed anymore and must be tabled in the Dewan Rakyat immediately and debated and passed before the end of the session in the Parliament.
I think we should invite a member of the PH
Who is
Presidential
that?
Council. He's
Dr. Marius. Let me
Dr.
try to bring him up. Dr.
Dr.
Marius is also he's the president of APCO in Sabah, and he's also one of the signatories of the MOU between the government and the Pakatan Harapan. And let me try to bring him up again. In the meantime, we've been trying to get YB Wilfred Madias Tangau to up on stage. James, what do you take of the new update?
So again, just to answer Fazal just now, I already mentioned that that the Malayan political establishment was very clear in terms of the way they manipulate the politicians in both Sabah and Sarawak. They play on two things. They play on this issue of Muslim solidarity, and they also play on the fact that initially in both Sabah and Sarawak, the Muslims were minority. So it's better for the Muslims in Sabah and Sarawak to go with the Muslim majority in Malaya, who will ensure the political supremacy in both states. Now, in terms of the damage done by the Malayans over Sabah and Sarawak, the biggest damage they've done is actually not related to MA63. It's the fact that they have changed the demography of Sabah completely. So I'm sure you all know of Project IC or Project M. This was a deliberate attempt, a very successful attempt to dilute the indigenous population of Sabah. So today, right, 1/3 of the blue holding or Malaysian IC holding Sabahans in Sabah today, their background is actually from PTI. Some of them are actually serving in the Dewan Undangan Negeri in Sabah. So that's the reason why, despite the RCI, despite many books written, despite many police reports made about the PTI issue in Sabah, this issue cannot be resolved because after more than a generation, a lot of these PTI people are now in key positions of power. So this is an example of where the Malaysian Federation has failed the states of Sabah, and that the Sabah that you see today has been totally transformed through a willful political act by the
Right, thanks, James. I think
elites
Mazliani has
into
indicated that
Islam.
she has something to say. Floor is yours, Mazliani. You've been trying to get my attention.
Thank you, Norman. All right.
I think Steve is also waiting.
Yes,
so
I have.
After you.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Thank you, Norman. Thank you, Prof. James and Dr. Johan, for your answer just now. With all due respect, regarding the amendment of the Constitution, allow me to bring your attention to the term constitutional literacy. So what is happening today is the rise of constitutional literacy amongst Malaysians, amongst Sabahans, because what has occurred back in 76 might be, one of the factors might be because of lack of understanding of the Constitution. So, as we all know, what is the Constitution? The Constitution is the document that regulates what the legislative does, what the executive does, what the judiciary does. It regulates the public service. It's basically how the whole country is constituted and how it's regulated. So why this amendment is beyond symbolic, it is because we need to lay out the foundation, how it is to be constituted, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the country. If we do not treat the Constitution as so sacred, if everybody is so illiterate on the Constitution, then it would defeat the whole purpose. In fact, the Constitution itself provides the characteristics of the federation. So that is why it is of utmost importance, beyond whatever we discuss tonight. The very basis of importance of constitutional literacy is what we should all be striving for, because all along this is very lacking in Malaysia itself. So not everybody appreciates or understands what the Constitution is about. And it is high time for all of us to create this awareness. And following this, I would like to say that our Constitution today, yes, it is the 1957 Constitution, correct? But because of the Malaysia Agreement 1963, which was then codified into the Constitution by way of the Malaysia Act 1963, number 26 of 1963. So the 57 Constitution has been amended substantially. So it is important for us to understand that spirit that was brought. Then we can carry on and implement. So this is where I came from. First, recognition of the form, and then we have to continue on the implementation. We have to fight on the implementation of the Constitution, as what Adi has said earlier, that it has to be something more of substance. And if we read the Constitution carefully, then we would understand that, yes, it is of substance, as what Datuk is speaking.
Thank you so much, Ms. Liani. I think we go to the very last person before we end the night with the final notes from Dr. James Chin and Dr. Johan Arrifin. Steve Mario, I think you were trying to say something earlier, Steve? Yes. Welcome back.
Actually, not so much. Actually, it's just like this lah. Because all I can say is because since tonight our topic is about MA63 and then the constitutional amendment. If we look back, okay, I'm sorry I have to say this, because in the first place, like Fazar said just now, I think Datin Fazar said just now, why the Sabahan especially agreed to form Malaysia. Because we want to, we want to prosper together with Malaya. We want to have that so-called the best facility, something like that lah kan. But what happened to us in Sabah? We are very lag behind. And I'm not going to talk but because this is going to be my final statement. Look at the health facility, what we have here in Sabah. We are very lag behind. The CT scan that we have is not even the up-to-date one. We don't even have enough MRI in Sabah. The only MRI we have is only in KK and just want to be installed in Sandakan. I'm not talking about private health facility here. I'm talking about government, especially for the people of Sabahan especially. You just imagine the people from Lawas in Sarawak, they have to send to Kota Kinabalu to Queen 1 just for a CT scan last time. I hope they're having now a better one lah. I hope. But in my place, in my place, it's not just we don't have, we have we are lack of facility. There's even there's even a district here in my place don't even have hospital, only have klinik kesihatan. And klinik kesihatan facility in hospital facility is totally different. Imagine if that person in kampung want to go for further treatment, they have to go, and I haven't talking about the road condition yet. We are very far behind. Malay says sempat mati baru sampai hospital. I mean, we are very lag behind. So we talk back about this. Yeah. So I really hope this amendment can bring good to us, the Sabahan, because in the first place, why this Malaysia agreement is being agreed in the first place? We want to have a prosper living, something like that. But sadly, we are far behind. So that's my final statement. I'm very sad when the people say that we are not 1/3 of the I'm very sad to hear that lah, especially coming from a lecturer some more. So yeah, I don't want to so sorry. That's that me. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
It's okay, Steve. I think as a round up, a quick take-home message. Let me start with Dr. Johan. What's your final note and take-home message to those who are listening tonight? Dr. Johan? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for arranging this.
Dr. Johan, probably you can put your microphone a bit nearer. We can't really hear you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak this evening. It's very been.
Your voice is still very soft, Johan.
Oh. Sorry, I'm trying to. Is James
Yes,
there?
James is there. So I think we can't really hear you. The microphone is a bit too far from you.
Yeah. You ask James.
Okay, sure. James, you go first. Sometimes technology just don't help us, right?
Yeah. Look. My takeaway is very simple. What we're dealing with today is an issue called historical grievances. It is not unique to Sabah or Sarawak, and it's not unique to the Malaysian Federation. Historical grievances exist because bad political decisions were made many years ago. In the case of Sabah and Sarawak, bad political decisions were made in the 40s, during the war, in the 1950s, in the 1960s. They were not made with regard to what will happen in the future. They were made because it suited the political environment at that time. The big problem we have in Southeast Asia is that the political boundaries that we see today are artificial boundaries. They were drawn out during the time of colonization. So historical grievances is not a new phenomenon. What is a new phenomenon in Sabah and Sarawak is that this issue has sort of really blown up after 2008, simply because the federal government, here I'm talking about the UMNO federal government, needed the MPs from Sabah and Sarawak to stay in power. So that's the reason why it has come back to the top of the political table. Now, in terms of the current amendments, I have said it consistently that it is highly symbolic. So whatever the motives are for the politicians, whether they want to use it to gain political mileage or they're doing it for cynical reasons, whatever it is, my public position is that I support the amendment because I think there is a certain thing in terms of historically symbolic things, and this amendment will go a long way in setting the record straight about the formation of the Federation of Malaysia. So my thing about the Malaysia Agreement is that many of the things that people are talking about going back to the Malaysia Agreement is that those things are probably not very useful because by and large the federal government, whether you believe me or not, is that anything that they disturb in terms of the Malaysia Agreement, they actually did sought permission from Kota Kinabalu and Kuching, and the political leaders at that particular time did agree to it. What I'm more interested is moving forward if we want Malaysia, the federation to be stable, then we need to find a new federal system or federal state relationship. Uh, in that system, the only suggestions I'll make is that Sabah and Sarawak's interests will be very different from the interests you have compared to states like Johor and Kelantan, Terengganu, for very simple reason that Sabah and Sarawak have unique histories, unique demography, unique culture, unique languages, what have you. So for historical reasons, in terms of setting up a new federal state system in Malaysia, it is something that we need a lot more discussion, a lot more thinking, and a lot more planning. But the bottom line is that the current political tensions we face in Sabah and Sarawak and the federal system over the Malaysia Agreement, this thing can't be resolved even with the Constitution Amendment going forward. If you want to resolve this issue, basically you have to look at the federal state system in Malaysia.
Thank you so
That's all
much,
from
Dr.
me. Thank
James. Now, your final note, Dr. Johan.
Yeah,
Loud and
can you
clear.
hear me? Okay, good. So sorry, I was disconnected just now, but I think Professor James Chin summed up very well the discussion tonight. Thank you for organizing, Norman. All I can say is that from the Sabah perspective, we have a lot of activists involved in MA63 discussions. Sometimes it goes on night after night, and I'm a bit tired of the same argument that I'm seeing every day, especially among the older crowd who tend to repeat the same thing all over again. And the young ones are eager to move forward and to find a new meaning for MA63 apart from the clauses, law, and so on. And I can understand their frustrations because they want to see, of course, a developed Sabah, a better Sabah, without all the baggage, our forefathers who carried it forward. And so I think most of the discussions on MA63 are more from the historical perspective, and a lot of people are discussing about the illegality of MA63 rather than the legality of MA63, and asking for what we can get under MA63 if it's a legal document. So I'm with the view that MA63 is a legal document, it's a binding document, but we have to extract from the Malaysia Agreement 1963 what will benefit us as a state to develop the state as we go forward. So I'm trying to move away from just the historical argument, historical perspective, and focus on the revenue part, because I think if we want to talk about equal partners, we need to have revenue. Without revenue, we're just talking. Okay, well, like some of our commentators just now, like a hospital, like a schools, like roads, and so on. So I think when we talk about MA63, we should not only talk about legal aspects of it, but to seek also a political solution to our problems. Okay, and Sarawak has proven that through political means they have been able to get the petroleum sales tax back, or not back. I mean to pass the petroleum sales tax and benefit 3 billion from the first payment from Petronas. So that is through more political solution. So I think there are many ways to skin a cat, and I think we should not only talk about the law, which is binding, but we also should talk about the political solution that can speed up the process of getting back what we want for Sabah and Sarawak. So thank you very much, and good night to you all.
That's the time that we have for tonight, and it's 11:09 p.m. And thank you so much to Dr. James Chin and Datuk Johan Arrifin and many of you out there following our conversation tonight with the Constitutional Amendment and Malaysia Agreement 1963. And this conversation is recorded, and if you missed the earlier part, both James and I are going to upload this onto our platforms. As for me, do check out the episode on Bicara Minggu Ini's podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as Spotify. And that's the time that we have tonight. In the meantime, I'll leave the room open. And in case you want to follow any of the speakers tonight or anyone in the room tonight, that's the time that we have. Have a good night, stay safe, and enjoy the week ahead.
Right.